You listened to her close last week?
Yes, it was fantastic.
It was lovely. I loved it. I sent her a message and said how much I liked it.
I seriously, when I first heard it, I thought you were taking a leak. I was like, what the hell is going on?
What? Are you having a Bloody Mary?
Yes.
That a boy.
Nice. Okay, let's record in 3, 2, 1. Record.
I'm recording.
Rolling.
Welcome to the Week 8 edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I am your host, Dan Myler, and I got my two buddies, Matt Price and Chad Scott, with me once again this week to talk a little Dynasty and talk about everything that happened in Week 8 and what is to be expected going forward. Chad, you are a ginormous Seahawks fan. The Seahawks game just got over minutes ago, and you're on a ridiculous high right now. That was the funnest game I've watched, the best game I've watched this year for sure, and possibly the last few years. How long is it going to take for you to come off this high?
I don't know. You called me like right after the game to like start the show, but I had to change my pants, so it took me to answer the call. But yeah, after unsticking my pants, taking them off, and changing them, it was just a great game. It was really awesome to watch Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson just kind of do their thing, anything they wanted to against, two historically good defenses. And I know Houston, they have a few of their studs out, but for Deshaun Watson to come into Seattle against that defense and just carve them up for 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, is just silly. And it just confirms that he's the QB1 in this QB class anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might be talking about a potential QB1 in the overall dynasty world down the road. It was impressive to watch. Those two quarterbacks on the same field accounted for nearly 1,000 yards of offense in those 3 hours that we all got to enjoy them play. And we're going to have a chance to talk about those guys. I should also bring in our third host, Matt. How was football without the Packers in Week 8?
Hey, I had a bunch of DeAndre Hopkins, a bunch of Jack Doyle, a little bit of Zeke Elliott spread in there. So not too bad of a week 8 for me.
Yeah, there were some real big games. You mentioned Zeke and DeAndre. We talked about the couple quarterback. Really anybody in that Seahawks-Texans game that you would have rolled out there came through for you. Shady, Melvin Gordon, they came through as well. But to me, with the exception of the late afternoon games on Sunday, Week 8 has been a little bit disappointing dynasty-wise or fantasy-wise. And part of that could be attributed to the 6 teams that are in bye. More can be attributed to the weather on the East Coast, which was certainly a factor on Sunday afternoon. Throughout the show today, we're going to do our regular thing. We'll do the dynasty ups and downs, but we're going to glaze over a lot of those big names that had the big games and the guys that we've talked about week in and week out, and focus on some of the guys that we haven't had a lot of chances to speak about so far in 2017. So we'll do the dynasty ups and downs, and then we'll also talk about what kind of moves we like to make as dynasty owners, depending on where we are in the standings or what kind of roster we have going down the stretch, as we're really over halfway through the regular season in most dynasty leagues, and those decisions need to be made here in these next couple weeks. But let's start with the dynasty ups, and there's no better place to start than that game that just got over. It was Seahawks, it was Texans. Like I said, everybody came through. Chad, you kind of talked about the quarterback play. Matt, I mentioned Watson as a potential top overall quarterback. Maybe not yet. We still have Aaron Rodgers. We still have all these other guys to talk about. But he has to be in the conversation at this point, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at my rankings now. I think I moved him up to 10 last week, and that might be low, honestly. I said last week I could be convinced to move him ahead of guys like Carson Wentz, and it's hard to doubt him at this point. Being able to go into Seattle, a place like that where we've seen presumably much better quarterbacks go in and just get completely flustered and have terrible games. So, that's one of the things that we talked about when Watson was coming out, was those intangibles, his abilities to really show up in big games like that and perform in stressful situations. So he's doing that in spades. He's doing everything that we thought he would do on that regard. And in terms of like all the arm strength issues and stuff, he looks pretty good to me on all those deep balls to Nuke and Will Fuller. So I am extremely impressed with him and sad that I think I have 0 shares of Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I have a couple shares of Deshaun Watson, and I really do wish I had more. Luckily, both of them come in super flex leagues, so they're even more valuable then, I guess. But I did pay a hefty price for them, mid-first round picks, to get him and make sure I got him on my teams, and I'm happy I did it, as I mentioned. A lot of people might think that this is, oh man, overreaction to such a huge game. But this is actually the 4th straight game of at least 3 touchdown passes. And he's got a couple rushing scores in there as well. He's performing like the top quarterback in fantasy football. And so I don't think there's any over-exaggeration here. He's impossible to buy at this point, especially in Superflex or 2 quarterback, because he's just so valuable and so young and all those things put together. I think months ago, if somebody would have said he's going to end up being Russell Wilson, we would have all been ecstatic. I think that upside might be even a little bit higher than Russell Wilson's, and that's no slight to Wilson for sure. Let's talk about Watson's receivers, Matt. I'm going to start with you and Will Fuller. I was critical of Fuller over the last couple of years since he was coming out of college, really. But and all those drops that he had in college, the drops he had as a rookie as well, really got on my nerves. And I have a hard time being excited about wide receivers that can't catch the ball or drop the ball a lot. Fuller's making me look bad here. 4 straight games with a score, 7 touchdowns overall over that 4-game stretch. Fuller's a every week starter at this point, right?
I keep saying that this tear he's on is unsustainable. It's like, what is it, 12 catches and 7 touchdowns? It's just ridiculous. It remember Mark Boerigter back in the day for the Chiefs had a stretch like this. But the knock on him before was, like you said, that he had kind of stone hands, right? And that he was just a deep ball guy, but he's showing that he can be used in shorter areas of the field. Previously today, most of his catches were not of those huge deep variety. So, he's evolving, he's healthy. He's got a great quarterback. If you are, let's say if you're an underdog, going into your matchup next week, I don't see how you don't put him in for that upside that he has. I think he definitely still has those dud weeks in him. But right now he's on fire, and I think you got to ride it out.
Yeah, and unlike some of those guys like Watson, who we talked about earlier, Fuller had a couple games in there where it was just 2 catches. In week 8, he had 5 catches, 125 yards, and he was targeted down the field, where we all like to see him make those catches. Let's go to the other receiver. It's kind of odd to talk about DeAndre Hopkins as the other receiver in Houston, but I guess he is, right, I guess for this conversation at least. Chad, Hopkins has also scored in 4 straight games. Obviously, Deshaun Watson has been great for these receivers, and likewise them for him. Hopkins has to be back in that elite tier of wide receivers right now, isn't he?
Yeah, no doubt about it. When you look at age and definitely his QB situation, even his head coach, this offense is just sizzling. Is there really a reason that we can think of that this offense is going to, torpedo anytime soon? I don't think so, unless there's a big injury to Deshaun Watson, obviously. But Hopkins he's shown it. He just needed a QB. This is who he was in 2015 to 2014, and we're just seeing. We're going to look at 2016 as this big outlier on him. So. Yeah,
there are still rankers out there, Matt, that have Hopkins ranked below guys like Amari Cooper, guys like AJ Green, and dare I say even Julio Jones and Antonio Brown. I'm starting to think that's going to start to flip-flop here shortly. I wouldn't be surprised if Hopkins starts to be considered in that top 3, maybe 4, Brown being 29, Julio Jones being 28, Odell Beckham and Mike Evans belong in the conversation among those top receivers, of course. Where do you rank Hopkins? Are you willing to take it that high?
I've currently got him at 8, as of last week.
You're one of those other ones.
Well, see, I love Hopkins, and I'm not gonna lie, I still have. It's probably still a little bit of being burnt from last season, but I definitely need to pop him back up there. Going into the 2016 off season, right after that 2015 season when he had 196 targets or something ridiculous. He was up in that top 5 conversation in a early half of the first round kind of startup pick. But that last season, 2016, kind of burned a lot of people, and he's back to being that target hog again, even with Will Fuller doing well there. I do think that the naysayers are going to continue to point to the high volume, but I mean, I don't understand why that's necessarily a negative for DeAndre Hopkins. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't get that volume unless Will Fuller just completely overtakes him. And I think that some people will make the argument that, hey, Will Fuller was drafted higher, has more draft capital spent in than DeAndre Hopkins. But at this point, I don't really think that matters anymore. It seems clear to me that he is Deshaun Watson's favorite target in that offense, at least in terms of how many times he wants to throw the ball to him. I don't know. I think he's definitely in that top 5 discussion for sure. And the way Julio has performed this season so far, whether that's the coaching change on the offensive side of the ball or whatever, he's just DeAndre Hopkins is definitely outperforming him so far this season. So I wouldn't argue with anybody that wanted to rank him above Julio at this point.
So I just pulled up your rankings, Matt, and it's an injustice. Absolutely. So you have AJ Green at 5, Michael Thomas at 6, and Amari Cooper at 7, with Hopkins coming in at 8. I would argue that all 3 of them should be behind Hopkins easily. And then maybe the guys that are even above them, you have Beckham, followed by Evans, Brown, and Jones. I think he's in the conversation there. So listeners out there, harass at @mpricer on Twitter and get this thing changed. It's an injustice.
Listen, the Cooper move up was obviously a reaction to last week's game.
An overreaction.
He was not 7 at that point. I think he was like 9 before that behind Hopkins. So I moved him up like 2 spots just ahead of Hopkins. Give me a break here, Dan. I'll fix it for next week.
Nuke just went for 8, 224, and a touchdown, so it's time to react to that, Matthew. Other receivers in that game also went off. We could talk about Jimmy Graham, but he's a pretty big name. Let's talk about Paul Richardson instead, Chad. 6 catches, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a 3rd touchdown called back due to penalty. He's scored in 4 of the Seahawks' 7 games this year. Is he on the wide receiver 4 radar for you in Dynasty right now, or is he still bench material?
No, I think he's in the conversation just because at this point, we're halfway through the season just about. They've shown basically the whole league that they can't run the ball, so the way they're going to win is through the pass. And as long as Paul Richardson is healthy and he's, lined up with Russ and Baldwin and Jimmy Graham, and you've seen the plays he makes. These aren't just easy catches. He's making these acrobatic one-on-one 50-50 balls all the time now, it seems like. Dude just gets his hands on the balls and it's his. So I think he's definitely in the talk. If he's healthy, he's going to be hard to bench at this point.
Yeah, I think he has a little bit of flex appeal for sure. A guy that, especially through these buys and with injuries that are happening throughout the position, he's a guy that you can consider for your lineup as we move forward. He has had a few games where the targets really aren't there, though. And so I think he has a low floor, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be considered for sure. The last guy I want to talk about from that game in week 8 is Lamar Miller. He's technically in the Dynasty Ups section here, but it's not going to sound that way, the way I'd probably frame this. 21 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Also caught 3 passes for 19 yards and another score. Deshaun Watson makes him look better as well. This is Miller's 2nd big fantasy game of the year. I said the last time he scored 20-plus fantasy points that I'd be shopping him and looking for a new home for Lamar Miller. It looks like I have another chance to try to sell him after the big game against the Seahawks, Matt. Are you one of the guys that will be using Sunday's big game as an opportunity to sell Lamar Miller?
I would if I owned him anywhere. I don't think I do. I'll have to double check. But yeah, I've just never been a Lamar Miller fan. I feel like Foreman is looming there. He didn't do anything today. Did he even play today? I don't think I even saw him.
He got in for like 2 snaps.
Like a 2 snap. Yeah, something ridiculously low right that. So maybe, I know he did miss practice on Friday, I think. So maybe he had some kind of like lingering issue. But I just kind of think that they want him to be a big part of that offense going forward. So I've never been a big fan of Miller in the first place. So I absolutely take this opportunity to sell.
Couldn't agree more. What would you be selling him for, Matt? Would you be taking a late first? Would you take even less than that? No,
I think a late first would probably be my bottom end, just because the running back position is so ridiculous. Like any running back that's getting any amount of volume is a startable player right now, and those guys are so hard to find. And if you have one on a good offense, then I don't really see a need to sell for less than that late first value.
I have Miller in one league still, and like I said, I tried to sell him a few weeks ago when he had that one big game, which I thought was going to be the one big game he has all year. He scored twice against Tennessee in week 4. I tried to sell him. The best offer I got was what looked like 2 mid to late seconds, and I passed. Now we're a little later in the season. That team is in the middle of the pack. I have other options at the position. I might consider that offer if I get the same response this week after sending it out or putting him on the trade block once again. Let's talk about a few other dynasty ups. I want to talk about Carson Wentz, and I know it probably wasn't a huge game in week 8, 211 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, 7 rushing yards. But we haven't gotten together, fellas, and talked since Wentz went off on Monday Night Football in week 7, 17 of 25 against the Redskins, 268 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 63 rushing yards on Monday Night Football last week. Man, Carson Wentz looks like another one of those young quarterbacks that's going to make that jump into the top 5 or 6 dynasty among rankers that do quarterback rankings. Does Carson Wentz have elite upside, Chad? And how high are you willing to take him if you're doing quarterback rankings?
Yeah, I think he does, just because he does add a little bit of that running factor in there as well. So Monday night, he had 63 yards rushing. He only had, I think, 7 or 8 today. But again, it was in one of those, they were playing back east, and it was just kind of that soggy field, and I'm going to blame that on more weather than anything for his performance. But I mean, he still came out the win. He didn't play the whole game. I think Nick Foles came in the fourth quarter to finish up the game. But this guy has everything you want. He's got a bunch of weapons at his disposal. I know Alshon Jeffrey is a free agent, I think, next year or after this year. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. But I think I believe in Doug Peterson as a head coach and a play caller. I think he has helped Wentz kind of get to that next level, and is kind of showing what he can do and what his ceiling can look like. I think he's a top 8 quarterback definitely going forward. And this is John Watson. You see Carson Wentz and these younger quarterbacks. Thank God, because NFL is we know like how many terrible starting quarterbacks are in the league right now, and they're retreads. There's backups going on to new teams, trying to start, like the Brian Hoyers, that sort of thing. It's good to see these young quarterbacks come into the league and kind of light the league on fire. So, yeah, Carson Wentz, his arrow's pointing up. I think he's definitely top 8.
Dynasty owners are so thirsty for that next group of quarterbacks. It makes me question a little bit the whole Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston thing. They've been up and down, and maybe Winston more than Mariota. Mariota's probably been more consistent. But
stop it.
With us being so thirsty for that next tier of quarterbacks, it's not surprising to me that Wentz and Watson and others are jumping up this high this quickly for sure. Matt, I won't drag your rankings into it again, for sure.
I got Wentz at 9. Come on.
Okay, I wasn't even going to look, buddy. But I did look through DLF's quarterback rankings when I was putting together the show for this week, and I saw him anywhere between quarterback 4 all the way down to 13. You just said you had him at 9. Are you willing to move him up any higher than that, or you feel comfortable right around there?
I feel comfortable there. I mean, he's behind Rodgers, Luck, Wilson, Newton, Winston, Mariota, Prescott, and Carr. That's it. Yeah. So, I mean, okay. I think he's right in that same range as Carr. I think I feel about the same as for those two. I still like Prescott better than those two, despite what he did today. And I'm still on team Winston and Mariota. I know they've had up and down seasons. Winston today particularly was pretty bad, but he's been dealing with a number of injuries all season. So I don't know. I still have a little bit more confidence in those two, I think, than Wentz at this point. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know.
Okay, let's move to a couple second or third tier running backs. We'll start with you, right back to you, Matt, with Alex Collins of the Baltimore Ravens. 18 carries, 113 yards, and a touchdown on Thursday night. He was pretty impressive. He broke some tackles, showed a pretty good burst, running between some not gaping holes for sure, especially in the first half of that game. Matt, is Alex Collins an RB2 in 2017, and do you see any long-term upside when you watch him play?
I don't know. I think that he's going to be so touchdown dependent. I know he got 100 yards today, but he doesn't really catch the ball. He got 2 today for 30, but in the past he has not really even gotten up to 2 receptions. So he's just one of those guys that are really difficult to start in a PPR league because you can get 4 to 6 points out of him, and then you're going to lose your week because of that. So I haven't had enough confidence to start him yet. If I'm starting a Baltimore running back so far, it's been Buck Allen because he catches the ball. I think he had 6 catches or something this past week. So even though he didn't get the touchdown or the huge volume like Collins did, he still scored, pretty comparatively. So I just don't know. And then we've got Kenneth Dixon coming back next year, presumably. I know he's got the suspension and that injury too to come back from, but it just seems like it's going to be a mess of a backfield. And then they could certainly draft somebody. That offense kind of fell apart this season after Marshall Yonda went down on the offensive line, even though they did just obviously boat race the Dolphins there. But I mean, are we really that impressed with the Dolphins right now either? So I don't know. I just don't like the guys that don't have a whole lot of PPR upside. And for me, Collins is probably not ever going to get in my lineup, except for maybe in a week like this where you have 6 teams on bye.
Yeah, Collins probably doesn't have that PPR upside that you're looking for, but in a standard league or maybe even a half PPR league, I think he's useful in 2017, but I don't see a lot of long-term upside. If I'm not a contender that needs the depth of Collins, I'm probably looking to sell him and gain some kind of draft pick or maybe a young player, a comparable young player that might not have gotten his opportunity just yet. Another guy that is getting an opportunity and shining, Chad, is Jerick McKinnon, 14 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown over in London on Sunday, 6 catches for 72 yards as well on 10 targets. He also scored on a 2-point conversion. It's been an up and down roller coaster for this Minnesota backfield since the injury to Cook, Chad. He outplayed Latavius Murray this week, who only had 39 yards on 19 carries. But last week, it was more of the Murray show. It seems like Murray's getting the early work, the early carries. It's a flip of the coin as to who to play each week if you own both of these guys between Murray and McKinnon. I really feel like McKinnon should get an opportunity to run with this job. He's looked better to me. How do you feel about these two when you compare them? And also, if you're in a rebuild, Chad, are you selling these Minnesota running backs just because there's not a lot of upside in the long term when Cook's healthy?
Yeah, so on McKinnon, I'm a believer in McKinnon again. I stopped being a believer last year. After he came out of the draft, I held on to him for a few years just because he was, the spark god and just to see what he could do with the role. And it just never panned out. And then, Cook goes down and he's out of the last 3 out of the last 4 weeks, I think he's scored 20 plus points. And last week he didn't, obviously. And so that was a little concerning when Murray went off. Was it going to go back to the Murray show and McKinnon being an afterthought? Well, I think this week kind of solidified that, Murray just had one of those good games. And I don't think we're going to see many good games from Murray because, he isn't good. Just hashtag good. He's not very good at running back. He just has no explosiveness anymore. He runs right into people. He gets what's blocked for him. McKinnon's a guy that can create for himself, catch out of the backfield, and I think that's huge in this offense. As a rebuild, I definitely sell Murray. McKinnon, I probably wouldn't just because, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next year as well. So I'd be to see where he'd land given the opportunity. So I would definitely sell Murray if you can. I'd sell him for a third at this point if I could. But McKinnon I'd hold, I think, unless I'm getting like wowed by an offer.
Matt, quickly, are you selling in a rebuild Latavius Murray right now?
Oh, yes, please.
How about McKinnon?
McKinnon, I think I might hold on to. I don't think he's a guy you want to give 20, 25 carries to, but I think he can easily be fine as like a 20-touch guy if you get him like 5-6 receptions a game. So, and in fantasy, that's what we want. I know when we were talking about Alex Collins, I neglected our guys that play in standard leagues, but I didn't know that was still a thing.
You neglected him even more, or you insulted him even more right there, Matt. So officially, Dan and Chad are just fine with Matt hates them, for those of you playing, essentially. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. Adam Thielen, he is my buddy. I love that guy, and I'm a Packer fan, and he's a Viking, and I know it's wrong, but it feels so right. Thielen goes for 598 yards. He also caught that touchdown, his first score of the year. He has at least 5 catches in all games, all 8 games throughout this season. Matt, who do you want for the rest of 2017 only? Thielen or Stephon Diggs, who goes 4 catches for 27 yards and no score in week 8?
I mean, I didn't even think Diggs was going to play today. I thought for sure they were going to hold him out since the bye is next week, but it's so hard. Given their price tag, I mean, Thielen is obviously the value play, right? And the production is there as well. But I think for upside, Diggs is still the guy. For the rest of 2017, it's really tough. I guess I'll go Thielen based on the consistency. But I know I'm going to be kicking myself when Diggs goes off for 170 again, like is going to happen in week 10.
Yeah, it might happen, but I love that consistency of Thielen, and I'm not usually that guy. I usually want a guy that can win you the week. I kind of think Thielen can be that guy as well. We just haven't seen the 2 touchdowns in a game yet. It's nice to see him finally get that score. I was playing around with the DLF Trade Finder tool today, and I saw him traded straight up twice for a single 2018 second-round pick, and that is cheap production.
Yeah, all day.
I love that deal. I would take it all day long. I'd buy him for a late first if I was a contender. Yeah. In fact, let's talk about Robbie Anderson, another lesser-known wide receiver. 6 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown on 6 targets for the Jets in Week 8. Chad, second straight week that Anderson has caught a touchdown on my Scott Fishbowl team as my wide receiver 1. Somehow I only have 1 loss. I don't know how I'm stringing it together. He doesn't have that great upside, but he's certainly useful as a wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. He certainly helped me out in a couple of places today. Chad, is he just useful as a bye week fill-in or injury fill-in, or do you think he has a chance to make that jump to the wide receiver 3 flex consideration type wideout?
No, I don't think he'll. I think people who have him, it was a perfect situation today because you probably had so many people on bye where you had to start Robbie Anderson and it paid off. But this is a guy it's just like Jermaine Kearse. It's going to be, when do you start him? And you're probably going to end up starting him on the wrong weeks, like I tend to do with Jameis Winston. And so I think the most consistent wide receiver they'll have going forward will be Kearse for 2017. Robbie Anderson is just kind of the home run threat that you want to play if you're like a huge underdog that could possibly go off that given week, but he's not a guy that I would trust every week in a lineup. No.
Chad, Trey McBride had 3 catches for 92 yards for the Bears against the Saints in Week 8, and a lot of guys are probably saying, "Who's that guy?"
Love Trey McBride.
I don't know him.
Out, man.
Mitchell Trubisky threw for just 164 yards, and McBride caught more than half of that production. It's a real small sample size with Trey McBride. He's a free agent in most of my dynasty leagues. Is he worth adding to you?
Maybe in 25+ man rosters, I'd maybe look to add him, if you have somebody that's just wasting away on your bench. I think he's worth a shot. I mean, I really liked him coming out in college. I liked when he got drafted. I didn't like when the Titans just didn't want to play him ever and put him on the practice squad. But opportunity, at least for the rest of this year. Made good on it today. He's worth a speculative ad. Now, are you ever going to play him? Probably not. But again, if you're just spec adding him right now, you're not really expecting to start him unless you're like in dire straits. But he's a guy that could possibly contribute this year and maybe look good for 2018 at the end of your bench.
Yeah, I agree. He's certainly worth a roster spot. Matt, would you rather have McBride or the recently added Dontrell Inman in the San Diego trade?
I mean, if I'm just looking at pure upside, it's probably McBride, but Inman has, been a fine producer for the Chargers in the past when they've had injuries to Keenan Allen and other guys out there. So I just think it's going to, I mean, I think we need a larger sample size here. I think we need more time still to see which of these receivers that Trubisky is going to prefer. So I just think it's such a dart throw every week, and I can't see ever starting one in the immediate future.
Matt, you said in the open that you were fortunate enough to have Jack Doyle in a bunch of your lineups in week 8. He had a career high 12 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown on 14 targets. It came at the expense of T.Y. Hilton, who had just 2 catches, but we'll get to that in the Dynasty Downs in a moment. Doyle, is he, Matt, a top 12 tight end going forward, a guy you're putting in your lineup every week?
I think he is for this season. I mean, that's not a high bar. I think the tight end 12 is scores 7.5 points a game or something in a PPR league. So
it's not a slam dunk then.
Yeah. I mean, any of these guys that are producing consistently are guys that we can put in. I mean, look at guys that we thought were going to be top 5 Dan, like Marty Bennett, and he's going to him. He's probably going to retire this season, is what he said today, right? So
this week, right? Hopefully,
yeah, something like that.
For my dynasty teams.
Yeah, but I mean, long term, it's tough with Doyle. I do think he's a good player, but you have what's his name, Eric Swoop linging in the background there. I still kind of have hopes for him as a deep dart throw guy that kind of athletic specimen that hasn't really played the game for very long. So I mean, I think it's hard to go away from Doyle at this point if you own him and you don't have one of those top options.
Let's cover a couple of downs here quickly before we move on to the moves we're making in Dynasty leagues as Dynasty owners. T.Y. Hilton, who we just talked about, Chad, 3 straight weeks with 2 or less catches. He only had those 2 catches in week 8. 2 big games this year, but 6 absolute duds for his fantasy owners. Is he still a no-doubt starter every week?
No. I just don't think he is. I think he's just so hit and miss right now. You want to play him in the juicy matchups, but even then you can't really trust him. I think he's like the perfect guy if you're a rebuild to just send somebody like an Adam Thielen type wide receiver right now and see if the contender will take him. If say they are a contender having Hilton, just because they're so frustrated with that situation right now. Because hopefully, I mean, with the rose-colored glasses, obviously, Andrew Luck will be healthy for 2018, and T.Y. Hilton will be back to doing T.Y. Hilton things. I would definitely make that Thielen for Hilton trade if it's possible. And I think if I was a contender and I had Hilton and somebody offered me that, I would really consider it right now if I wanted to make a run at a championship. So I don't trust him for the rest of this year. I think he's still one of the great talents at wide receiver, but him and Brissett just can't get on that same page right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to me for sure, because I am a Thielen lover. I think I would probably still ask for a sweetener, but I might go for it in the right situation. I've been burned by Hilton a couple of times already. Both of his big games have cost me big time. That's the week I decided to sit him, and then he goes off. So It's been kind of painful. There was a report late on Sunday night that the Colts may be willing to trade Hilton as well. I don't know how much air is in that balloon, if that's actually the truth or not. That might be something just floated out there. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. The Colts will need a number 1 receiver, and it doesn't appear like Dante.
He's the best offensive player on the team. I mean,
absolutely, maybe even better than Andrew Luck when he's healthy. He actually helps Andrew Luck be Andrew Luck. So it doesn't seem like there's a lot of truth behind that one to me. But the Colts have made questionable decisions in the past. Last guy in the downs that I want to talk about, Matt, is my good buddy Drew Brees. I'm not upset. I'm not angry or anything like that, but man, it hurts. I'm just disappointed. 2 straight down fantasy weeks. He had 299 passing yards in week 8. but he didn't throw a touchdown. He only has one touchdown in the last couple games. The Saints seem like a different team right now. They're committed to the running game. Mark Ingram with 25, 22, and 18 carries in the last 3 weeks. Over that same span, Alvin Kamara, 10 carries, 9 carries, and 8 carries. They are handing the ball off a lot. They're using those guys as pass catchers in the short to intermediate game as well. Matt, are you worried about Drew Brees? Is he still that elite every week starter for you?
Dan, why are you going to be so greedy? He almost got you 300 yards today, man.
Almost.
I mean,
no picks.
Yeah, the Saints are just such a balanced offense right now. Like I love what Sean Payton has done with that offense this season. He's finally come through on that promise to get Ingram, 20 plus touches a game. The team is just running on all cylinders right now. So I don't really think you can change what Drew Brees is doing based on how the team is performing. But I guarantee you don't have a better. I mean, okay, I can't can't guarantee you, but I think most teams probably don't have a better option on their roster at any point, especially like a one quarterback league. So if you have Drew Brees, your backup is probably nothing to write home about. So I just don't think there's any way you can bench him. But you have to ride out these kind of weeks like this. At least he's not killing you with interceptions.
Yeah, that's all true. And in the couple places where I have a relatively comparable option, it's Jameis Winston, and I'm not going to make that move, certainly not going that far. And if you're in a single quarterback league and you're lucky enough to have Deshaun Watson, maybe you do make the switch. Luckily, I don't have to make that decision. Before we move on in this week's podcast, I want to mention our friends over at PlayerLine. PlayerLine is a free fantasy sports app for Android and iOS that offers instant real-time insights into every player in the NFL. All your fantasy news in one place, including news from us here at DynastyLeagueFootball.com. With the last 15 or 20 minutes of our podcast this week, we want to take a look at the moves we as Dynasty owners like to make, fellas, for the remainder of 2017, depending on our record and the performance of our roster to date. I'm going to give you guys a few situations and let us as the listeners know what you would do with these situations. Let's start with a dominant Dynasty team, a team that you probably expected to be very good, probably a lot of veterans on the roster. Maybe you're undefeated, maybe you're 7-1, maybe even 6-2 at this point, and one of the top 1 or 2 scoring teams in the league. First, Matt, I'll throw it to you. Are you willing to sell? How willing are you to sell your top 2018 first-round draft pick?
It depends on course. If I think it's a guy that I need for my run, I'm absolutely willing to do that. I will say, disclaimer here, as I am very bad about sending away my future picks. They're just nothing to me right now. I'm very sad in my rookie draft when I don't get to make the pick, but if it gets me a title, then I honestly don't care,
I agree with that as well. Chad, are you on the same boat?
Especially like seconds and thirds and fourths, I really don't care about. But when it comes down to first, like I have a little trepidation. But if I'm getting the guy that I think will give me the championship, I have no issue doing it. So
now listeners know we're all willing to sell first round picks. So you're a dominant team, Chad. You have one of the best teams in the league. In every league I'm with you in. It's a start two running back league. But you only have 2 legit starters. They're top-end guys. Maybe one of them's Zeke. And you're still kind of leery of the whole situation happening. Are you willing to sell that first-round draft pick next year for a veteran like LaShawn McCoy or maybe even DeMarco Murray?
I would sell it for McCoy. I would not sell it for Murray. I would sell it for Ingram.
Yeah, okay. That was my guy too.
Matt, different situation for you. Dominant team. You're 7-1. You're getting by with below average quarterback play in a single quarterback league. Are you going to sell that first round pick for an elite veteran like the aforementioned Brees or maybe Tom Brady?
I will not, and I can actually back this up with a situation that I had this past week.
Tell us about it. I love those.
I have a team that lost Rodgers and Palmer. So I'm sitting there with the prospects of starting guys like Hundley and Brissett every week. So I had an opportunity to buy a guy like Dak Prescott this week of my late first round pick. I decided to say no, and instead I bought Andy Dalton for a third. So this is also thank you to Eric Dickens for help talking me down off the ledge on this, because I almost did it. Yeah. But he is a guy that will do anything possible to not sell a first round pick for a quarterback. So help me get there. So I think Brady might be tough to pass on if I literally had nothing at quarterback. But yeah, I'm going to do everything in my power to not send my first for any quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part there, but there are special situations, it feels like to me. If you're truly a dominant team and that is the one thing holding you back, you're starting a quarterback that has not been consistent, maybe one of those veterans, somehow you're getting by with Eli Manning or something like that, and to take that jump to Brady or Breeze, it'd be hard to say no to that if it truly looks like the 11th or 12th pick in a rookie draft. Let's move on to the good team. It's a quality team, 6-2, 5-3, one of the top 4 scoring teams in the league, Matt. I think it's probably safe to assume that all of us willing to sell first-round picks still, but maybe a little bit less willing to sell that 2018 first with a good team rather than a dominant team. It's a super flex league, Matt. Dominant team early, but lost the last couple weeks. You lost Aaron Rodgers. You just talked about this. You lost Rodgers and Palmer in one league. And have couple other question marks like Stephon Diggs and his injury and Devontae Adams and his lack of quarterback on your roster. Are you going to sell your 2018 first for a veteran quarterback to replace Rodgers in that situation?
Yeah, in a super flex, I definitely think that is the move to do, because the quarterbacks are just so hard to come by in that league. And if I can even get a guy, even a guy like Alex Smith, who may not have a whole lot of long-term value and maybe having like a career season right now and may not ever get back to that, I think it's worth it if you're in that mix there, because without a quarterback like that, you're probably not going to be making a run, even if you do have a good team. So I think that situation in a super flex league or a 2-quarterback league, that's a move I would make.
I was originally going to give that question to Chad after you shared your story, but I thought the difference might sway you to the other side. It apparently did. Chad, you have a good team. You always do, right, buddy? 6-2, 3rd in scoring. Your roster's full of veterans. You've been a top 4 scoring team every week so far, but the only youth on your roster is Devontae Parker, who is your wide receiver 3 and has missed some time recently. Are you going to deal him for a vet such as Michael Crabtree or Jordy Nelson?
Not Jordy Nelson. I
was afraid of putting him in there just because I think there's a lot of skepticism when his name comes up.
In that situation, like Crabtree, I don't think I would. I think I'd want a little something extra with Crabtree, but I can see a lot of people trying to do that because, Crabtree has been consistent, and a first is a first, and if it's in the middle, that's a crapshoot anyway. But towards my first right now, and hope that value kind of exceeds as the off season goes on.
I think I would have a little bit of trouble with the ones right in here. I'm actually high on Parker specifically, but there's other names we could have put in there, those young guys. With that upside, Mike Williams comes to mind from the Chargers. If he was your guy, maybe not a guy you were counting on, but you were high on at one point. Juju Smith-Schuster kind of comes to mind in this situation. Maybe not with these same receivers that you're getting in return that I mentioned there, but all these guys that you're high on, Matt. If you're in this situation, you have that good team, that team you feel like can make a push. Maybe there's not a dominant team. There's 3 or 4 good teams, and you're in the mix there. Are you willing to make moves like that?
Yes, depending on the player. Jordy would have been an absolute yes pre-Rodgers injury, but now it's like John was saying, it just doesn't feel good. It feels a little icky. Crabtree, I think I love Crabtree. He's so undervalued. I think you might be able to get him a little bit cheaper than that in Dynasty. I think I would. But Parker, he's been playing well. So as long as he comes back and is healthy, you threw a couple of those other guys out there. So I get what you're doing, but with a guy specifically like Parker, I probably wouldn't. But there are definitely players in that range. Juju, I think I would for sure. So yeah, I think I would, depending on the players in there.
One trade that I saw that I really wanted to mention, but I think it would get a lot of different opinions, I guess. Recently, before week 8, I saw Devontae Parker on a contender be sent away to a rebuild or maybe a middle of the pack team for Doug Baldwin. And the contender was in big need of some help this week, playing one of the top other teams in the league, and would pretty much do anything for Baldwin. It seemed like that Baldwin guy got a pretty good deal on that to me. So I was going to bring him into it, but I think we'd get a lot of different opinions with that one. Let's move on to a team that is overachieving, fellas. Matt, your team is 6-2, but you're 6th in scoring. First place in the league, though. Are you going to sell your first-round pick for Mark Ingram to replace Isaiah Crowell in your starting lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I would sell mid to late first for Ingram, almost any situation, I think, unless I was just a complete rebuild. Like, I was, I don't know, 2 or 3 wins this season so far, that kind of thing. But I think in most situations, I would sell a first for Ingram.
I think the thing for me that changes this one, Matt, is because you're an overachiever. It's probably a team that you expected to be a bottom 6 team, and maybe you're towards the top. And I don't know what took you to the top of the leaderboard, or what made you one of the top 6 teams, and maybe you just get lucky wins, whatever it might be. But if I'm that overachiever, I'd think long and hard about it. I'm an Ingram guy as well, and it just seems to me like you might be setting yourself up for something you don't want to deal with a year from now.
I just think that he has 2 to 3 good years left in him easily. He's 28? He's under contract with the Saints again next season, so you're going to get at least the rest of the season and next season out of him. I know Kamara is back there, but I just think that as long as Ingram is there, and we know that it's going to be at least 2 years unless he gets traded, then you're going to have a fine asset there. So I see what you're saying, but I just don't think he's that short-term of an asset. I think he's going to be good for several more years.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was kind of playing devil's advocate. I think I would do the deal as well, and I'm sure. one of the guys. I'm one of the guys that if I can sneak into that last spot, even I want to do it, even at the cost of a first-round pick. Chad, exactly. Different situation for you. Another team that's overachieving. You're 3rd place in the standing, but 8th in overall points on the season through 8 weeks. You have a very young team full of rookies, 2nd and 3rd year players that are kind of on the come. Are you going to sell Evan Ingram, who's your starter at the position, for Rob Gronkowski in a tight end premium league with that roster?
Oh, am I selling Evan Ingram for Gronk?
Don't do it.
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
do it.
I would sell Evan Ingram for Gronk. Definitely.
Oh, this is an odd. This came up last week, Chad, when you weren't here. I'm sure you heard it because you always listen when you're not on. And Matt mentioned it. And then before tonight's program, he mentioned that he has done a very similar deal. I think there were a couple other little pieces in it. And I think it's a really interesting one. Why are you going to sell Ingram right now for Gronk if you're an overachieving roster?
Because Gronk is still only like 28, isn't he? I mean, he's still fairly young. I mean, and he's still dominating the position. I love Evan Ingram, but I mean, who has more? So if somebody offered that to me, like, I'll give you Gronk for Evan Ingram, yeah, I'll take it, because I can sell Gronk for more than I could sell Evan Ingram for right now, and most.
Right, that's fair.
So getting the better tight end. Sell Gronk for more later on if I need to.
The thing I always come back to on these types of situations is what's the chances that the young guy becomes the old guy or better? So, and I think it's fair to say that we've never seen a guy like Gronk. Gronk has never existed before Gronk stepped on a field. I know there's been a lot of really great tight ends, but fantasy-wise, delivering that kind of upside week in and week out just doesn't really happen. So even if you are foolish enough to say that Evan Ingram has a 50% chance of becoming Gronk, which I think is outlandish, I don't think that exists. I still think that's a horrible trade. I still want Gronk every single time. Now, I understand that it's become a lot closer. And, Matt, you'll have a chance to defend yourself here in a moment. But it's silly to me to go quite that far. Matt, you said, I think you told me that you got something extra with Evan Ingram. Why are you so high on Ingram that you're willing to sell the best tight end we've ever seen?
I was trying to pull up the numbers in front of me now. I can't find them, but oh no, stop. Sorry, Aaron. I can't find the numbers in front of me right now, but they're ridiculous. Like he's like number 1 or 2 in targets, receptions through like the first 8 weeks of any rookie tight end in the last a decade or so. I can't. I wish I could find it right now, but I can't. I apologize. But look those up. He is performing at astronomical rate for a rookie tight end right now. You're getting, what is it, 7 years on him? I think was he 21, 22. So you're getting 7 or 8 years on him. He's going to be an elite tight end. I don't think it's fair to compare him to Gronk in terms of the style of player he is. I think he's more wide receiver than Gronk is. I think he's a little bit more of a finesse player. I think he's a little bit underrated as a blocker. We've talked about that before. But I just think the volume that he's going to get in that offense, I think he's going to be the number 2 option behind Odell Beckham in that offense. And I know Gronk is basically the number 1 there. But, if unless I am, absolutely a dominant team, and I think Gronk is going to put me over the top. I just want the youth of Ingram and the upside that's coming there. I don't think that he's going to be as much of an injury-prone guy as Gronk has been throughout his career, so that's always looming with him too. You're always waiting for that other shoe to drop with Gronk. So I just, unless I'm an absolute dominant team right now and Gronk is like the final piece of the puzzle, then I just think I want Ingram instead. And in that deal, I was on a rebuild, so maybe I'd be less likely to do it if I was a contending team. But I got like a second and a third back along with Ingram for Gronk. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a horrible trade at all.
I mean, where is he? Let me ask you this, Dan. Where is he in your tight end rankings? I mean, for me, he's already at, I think, 3 or 4. So
yeah, I think I have him at 5.
So I mean, he's right.
It's not crazy. It's certainly not crazy. And to your point that you made earlier, the only reason these two players are compared against each other is because they're both tight ends in fantasy. They're obviously completely different skills and completely different as far as what their strengths and their weaknesses are, and what makes them great are two different things. But because they play the same position on my fantasy league, they're going to be compared forever. And
he's 5 years younger than Gronk, so I was a little bit off there, but still, you're getting 5 extra years there.
Still, it's worth noting for sure. Let's move on to a fringe playoff team. Chad, you are right around 500, maybe a game under or a game above, but you're 6th or 7th in the standings. And going to try to make a push for that last playoff spot. It's probably fair to say that all of us are wanting to get that 6th seed in the playoffs and taking a roll of the dice and trying to upset a few folks and win a championship maybe when we didn't deserve it. I like winning those just as much as I like winning with that dominant team, for sure. Maybe even more, actually. Situation for you, Chad. You expected to make the playoffs early in the season or maybe in the off season, and you need a quality starter to feel good about those playoff chances. So maybe you're slightly underachieving. You expected to be one of those 4th, 5th, or 6th seed, but right now you're at 7th and kind of your chances are murky at best. Are you putting your 2018 first round pick on the trade block to see what you can get to try to get one of those last couple playoff spots?
Yeah, I mean, as much as sometimes I fight within myself about this situation, but when it comes down to it, I always just want to get into the playoffs and figure it out. So I would. I wouldn't sell it for 75 cents on the dollar, but I would definitely put it up and get something reasonable that could either help me this year and the next at least 2-3 years in my league, because it's not something that I want to get like a Larry Fitzgerald. It's a bad example now because Palmer's out, but say Palmer was in and somebody offered me Larry Fitzgerald for it, I probably wouldn't do it just because it would only help me this year and not for the year after that. So if it's somebody who's quality and can help me for at least 2-3 years afterwards, yeah, I would definitely do it.
I thought this was one of the most interesting ones just because some owners are so afraid of a couple injuries happen and all of a sudden I earn the 3rd pick and I sold it away for a wide receiver that didn't really help me get over the top. Maybe you got Golden Tate or Emmanuel Sanders, somebody like Kelvin Benjamin or something, the guys that go for right around that. Even Adam Thielen, who we talked about earlier. It's really an interesting one for me. And I guess I fall on the aggressive side all the time, probably like you, Chad.
I would love Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
I would love Adam Thielen. Man.
I already
do. This is like, so obviously his picture is going on this podcast, right? Adam Thielen's picture for the podcast. Yeah.
Absolutely. The love fest has begun. I got a Thielen that Thielen will be our cover boy.
No one has
for
ever
this
used
week.
that tagline before.
Yeah, that's a first for sure.
The first one, Dan.
Sorry, Aaron. Matt,
super. Thanks
a different situation. Matt, a different situation for you. Rebuild that is getting big production from some of the youth on your roster, like Kareem Hunt and Evan Ingram, your buddy that's on all of your teams. You have 3 2018 firsts that you accumulated in the previous offseason, and now you're kind of overachieving, but you're a fringe playoff team. Are you willing to trade one of those or maybe even 2 of those first-round picks to make a push now with all that youth?
Absolutely, I am. I mean, I think you have a window, and when you're in that window, you got to push that opportunity, even if you're a young team. And if I have 3 2018 first, I mean, come on, I'm definitely going to sell at least one of those guys, one of those first to go get a piece that can help me get that last playoff spot, like you guys were talking. So, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to completely derail my rebuild or anything like that. But if I'm in a position where I think I can make the playoffs, I'm looking ahead of my schedule, and I'm playing some teams that are, even scoring less than I am, then I'm definitely willing to make a move like that.
Yeah, I think the lesson there is probably that just because your plans changed, you were planning on being one of the bottom 3 or 4 teams, and now you're all of a sudden the 6th best team. That, those plans change, you should adjust with them, I guess.
It's just like in a draft. You got to be flexible to what's happening around you. You may go in with one plan, and then the way the draft breaks down, you're going with something completely different.
Another interesting situation that Dynasty owners find themselves in right now is the rebuild. Whether it's a planned rebuild or you had some veterans that didn't work out, you're sitting at 0-8 or 1-7, even 2-6 or 3-5, and you just know this year isn't going to work out. This one's for both of you, and we'll start with you, Chad. Are you absolutely not selling your first round pick in that case? Or, obviously there's some guys, if somebody offers you maybe Kareem Hunt or Ezekiel Elliott or one of them big names.
Yeah.
Some owners are closed-minded and they say, man, that could be Saquon Barkley or it could be the next Kareem Hunt. What are your opinions when it comes to that first round pick for the future in a rebuild?
Yeah, I mean, when you're tossing out those kind of names, like Hunt and Zeke and those sort of names, it'd be really hard for me to say no because they're still both so young and almost basically at that elite tier. I know Zeke is, Hunt's TBD right now, but those kind of guys definitely. But I'm not doing it for veterans who have been in the league for 6-7 years. For the most part, I tend to, if I'm in a total rebuild, I'm fine with, in knowing I'm not going to make the playoffs with any sort of luck or anything that goes into. I usually keep those first for sure and try to accumulate. So it would have to absolutely blow my mind with like a young player to do that sort of thing.
Matt, once again, I'm aggressive in this situation. I like to throw my first round pick out there when I'm the 3rd or 4th worst team, especially, and I expect to get the 3rd or 4th pick. In fact, a friend of mine is in a situation like this and asked me about it, and I told him I would send out that offer right now for Odell Beckham and try to steal Beckham while he's injured, and with another team that's down on their luck. It didn't work out for him. He didn't get Beckham in the deal, but those are the types of deals that I try to make. Once again, being aggressive, trying to buy the guy while he's maybe low, like Beckham might be right now. How do you look at those first-round picks, whether you're buying them or selling them in a rebuild?
Yeah, I'm with you. If it's not a top 2 pick, then I'm more likely to move to them. I think there's probably about 15 guys that I would sell, like if I had the guaranteed 101 or 102 that I would sell it for. But anything outside of that top 20 or so, maybe top 15, I'm not going to sell that pick for that. But once we get down to 3, 4, 5, I'm much more willing to kind of open up that umbrella a little bit larger.
I think maybe 2018 might be a different situation because of all the publicity surrounding Saquon Barkley. There is a lot of people that are absolutely gaga over him. It's interesting that you said maybe 15 guys, and I know you did that on a whim, just threw it out there, Matt. But our buddy Ryan McDowell tweeted, I think it was Sunday, that if Barkley was in a startup draft right now, he would probably be a top 12 pick. And Ryan's is one of the opinions we all carry very highly, I guess. I saw that tweet and I thought to myself, man, I don't think I can disagree with him because of all the love surrounding that player at Penn State. And I'm a Big Ten football fan and watch Saquon Barkley a lot. So I'm not going to disagree with that. I think it's a really interesting situation we find ourselves in this year. There's going to be somebody out there that sold a 2018 first, whether it be 2 years ago or last year or midseason this season, that turns into Saquon Barkley and will be kicking themselves, I'm sure of it, especially if Barkley ends up like any of these other running backs that have come out the last few years. So I hope you enjoyed this week's edition, the Week 8 edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. For my buddies Matt and Chad, I'm Dan Myler. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at DLF Podcast. Give us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing, what you think of the early release each week, and if there's anything you'd like covered on the pod. You should also follow Matt at mpricer. Tell him that he's way too low on new. Follow Chad at Chad_Scott13, and you can follow me at DMyler22 if you'd like as well. Thanks again for listening to the Week 8 edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. We'll catch you again next week.
Nice work.
Right at an hour. And we got a couple things.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Nice. They'll be able to cut out, like 20 seconds or something. So we'll be on that.
I know, right?
Oh, that was a good one. I'm glad. I meant to reach out to you, Matt, and make sure that I wasn't stealing your thunder a little bit, because I know you mentioned that maybe we should do that third segment.
Oh, no, not at all. Please.
Yeah, I didn't.
About what? Care. What happened?
Well, he mentioned a few weeks ago, hey, at some point through here, we need to do what are you doing if you're a rebuild? What if you're doing, if you're overachieving, or if you're a dominant team, what kind of trades are you looking for? And because this week had all the buys and didn't have, those big games from all those players, I decided to just do it. I probably could have asked Matt first.
No, we did a little bit of it last week too, so you're not stealing anything, please.
Yeah, okay.
I have no ego. No pride. You can steal whatever you want.
Okay. All right, I'll check out your rosters and send you some offers.
Would you like my wife? You'll be good.
That's right.
Or I could.
No, you're safe there. I don't think my wife would be good with that.
What was this? Is this 278?
Yeah. I decided after screwing up that one week and saying it was 272 for the second straight week that I wasn't going to say the number anymore, because I was never really confident.
I wonder if anybody cares about that. I mean, I do it every.
That'd be like 280 now, right?
I think it's
278.
It was last week, I think.
Well, we did 77 last week. So
77.
I thought it was okay. I thought it was 78 when I did it 2 weeks.
I don't think it really matters. I think it's cool to mention when you're at the 300th and the 250th, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I think once we get to 300, we should definitely.
That'll come in the off season then.
At 250, we had remember we had Eric on, Dickens on.
We did a good one. So. That was a good one.
Yeah.
You might not have been here yet, Chad, with that one. I don't think you were.
I still listen.
Recording.
So
yeah
I had like a burst, and it shut my recording off twice, but I caught it right away on both of them, and I was done talking on all of them. So hopefully she can figure it out.
I'm gonna let you.
Are you gonna put them in as A, B, and C?
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I caught him
immediately,
really quickly. So it should be fine.
Okay.
But we'll see. What was this? What are we labeling it to? What?
It's 278. I just looked at the feed.
278.
Yep.
All right. I'll get these in here. Juju had a 41-yarder to start the game off.
Yeah, I got it on here.
Oh, you do?
I love that guy. I wish I had him in every league.
I know. I only have him in a few.
He was so cheap, and I had him. I had him ranked higher than most guys I was drafting against, and it just didn't work out so many times. And it's part of it is because of Evan Ingram, because I was higher than him too. So I'd end up with him in the late first or early second, and be happy with that. And I still am. Juju Smith.
Oh yeah, I was so down on him. I didn't want anything to do with him. That was definitely a bust for me. Is there anything that still makes you think that, or have you kind of flipped on it? Oh no, I've totally flipped on it. Like
who just dead against him are still like he's still only catching 2 balls a game, or
no, I'm on board now for sure. I think Martavis is whined enough that Juju's going to be. Yeah. He just got a concussion, but it doesn't even matter. He's back, right? So
yeah.
That's the second one, though, isn't it?
I took a bit. I thought he was going to be what's his face, Laquan Treadwell again. You know, a guy who had a lot of nice production in college and then shit the bed at the combine, but it's clearly not the same thing.
I named the what do you call that? What we did at the end there?
What do you mean? Oh,
something not dynasty situations, or like something's got to be a more flashy word for phrase.
Another word for situation. That's the clever word I came up with. I thought you could do better.
How about dynasty interrogation?
No.
Seems a little bit aggressive.
That's a little aggressive. Holy cow.
Shine a light in your eye.
Dynasty directions.
That's pretty good.
You got some alliteration at least.
Yeah.
Some dynasty interrogations. Dynasty waterboarding. with your host Dan Myler.
I like that one. I like dynasty waterboarding. That one's.
How about positioning?
Dynasty whereabouts, dynasty positioning.
Positioning your roster or positioning your future, or yeah.
Okay.
I like positioning.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So DP.
Yeah.
Build penetration.
Oh, is that what that means on those videos I watch?
We're going to have to throw the explicit
in both holes.
Tag on here.
Oh, I'm downloading all 3 of my.
I'm glad I killed my recording. Although I haven't killed the backup, so I'm not going to send that to her unless she asks.
I kind